Monica Lewis had boarded countless flights in her life, but this one was supposed to be routine. A quiet return from a whirlwind business trip in San Francisco back to her company's headquarters in New York. As the CEO of a billion-dollar tech firm, her schedule was relentless. Yet she still valued these rare moments in first class when she could sip coffee, answer emails, and mentally prepare for the week ahead. With her boarding pass in hand, she approached seat 1A, the spot she had specifically booked weeks earlier, only to freeze mid-step. A sharply dressed man in his mid-50s, silver hair combed back, was lounging comfortably in her seat. His jacket hung on the armrest, his tablet open as if the space had been his all along. "Excuse me, sir," Monica said politely but firmly, her voice carrying the confident cadence of someone used to being listened to. "I believe you're in my seat." The man looked up with narrowed eyes, his expression flickering between annoyance and entitlement. "I don't think so," he replied with a smirk. "I always fly 1A. Maybe you're mistaken." Monica held up her boarding pass, the bold lettering clearly stating seat 1A. "It's not a mistake. This is my ticket." The man chuckled, a condescending sound that made nearby passengers glance up. "Listen, sweetheart," he said, his voice dripping with casual arrogance. "Why don't you take another seat? I'm sure they'll find you somewhere back there." He gestured vaguely toward the economy cabin, dismissing her presence as though she were an inconvenience rather than a paying passenger with the same rights he had. Monica's stomach tightened, but she kept her composure. This wasn't the first time she had been underestimated or dismissed because of her race, her gender, or the combination of both. But she hadn't risen to the top of the corporate world by letting people walk over her. "This is my seat," she repeated, this time with steel in her tone. "You'll need to move." The man's smirk widened as he leaned back in a chair, crossing his legs as though staking his claim. "You can complain all you want. I'm not moving. I have status with this airline. They'll back me up." His words carried loudly enough for others to hear, and a few passengers exchanged uneasy looks, whispering behind their hands. Monica noticed a flight attendant approaching, her expression uncertain as she assessed the situation. Before Monica could speak again, the man waved the attendant over with a dismissive flick of his hand. "Yes, can you tell this lady she's mistaken? This is my seat." The attendant hesitated, glancing between Monica's boarding pass and the passengers sprawled in 1A. "Sir," she began carefully, "this seat is assigned to Ms. Lewis. I'll need to see your ticket." The man huffed, but didn't move. "I already told you I always sit here. Do you really think she bought this seat?" His eyes slid back to Monica with a sneer that said everything. He didn't believe someone like her belonged in first class at all. Monica felt the weight of every gaze in the cabin pressing down on her, some curious, some sympathetic, others simply waiting for drama to unfold. She steadied her breathing, forcing herself to project calm authority even as her patience wore thin. She was used to boardrooms filled with egos, investors who doubted her, and competitors who wanted to see her fail. This was no different. It was just another stage, another test. "You need to move," she said once more, her voice low and commanding, not just for him, but for everyone listening. But the man only leaned back further in the seat, smug and immovable, as though daring her to escalate the matter. And in that moment, Monica realized this flight was about to become far more than a trip home. It was going to be a battle of principle, one that would echo far beyond the runway. The cabin air grew thick with tension as the flight attendant glanced helplessly between Monica's boarding pass and the stubborn man seated in 1A, her professional smile faltering under the weight of conflict. Monica, standing tall in her tailored blazer and composed demeanor, refused to step back, though every second she remained standing felt like a spectacle. The man crossed his arms and smirked, clearly relishing the drama, as if it were a stage built just for him. "You see," he said loudly, as if speaking to an audience, "this is the problem these days. People think they can just walk in anywhere they don't belong. She probably booked a cheap ticket, and now she's trying to sneak into first class." His words landed like a slap, and Monica felt a ripple of murmurs spread across the cabin. She caught the eyes of a young woman two rows back, shaking her head in disgust, not at Monica, but at the man's arrogance. Monica's voice was calm, but every syllable carried the force of someone used to commanding respect in boardrooms filled with powerful men. Sir, enough. My ticket clearly shows 1A. The airline has my payment. You are not entitled to what you didn't purchase. The attendant tried again, her voice tinged with nervousness as she leaned toward the man. Please, sir, I'll need to see your boarding pass now. He waved her off with a dismissive hand. Don't waste your time. I'm a platinum member. They always upgrade me to 1A. He flashed a smug smile at Monica. Maybe she doesn't understand how things work. That was the breaking point. Monica's lips pressed into a thin line, but her eyes sharpened with fire. No, she said firmly, her voice steady but edged with power. What you don't understand is that money, loyalty points, or arrogance do not give you the right to disrespect another passenger. This is not about your status. This is about basic decency. A hush fell over the surrounding seats as passengers leaned closer, sensing the weight of her words. Another flight attendant arrived, her expression more serious. She crouched slightly to Monica's level. Ms. Lewis, would you mind waiting by the galley while we sort this out? Monica's eyes flicked toward her with measured intensity. No, I will not be dismissed to make this man more comfortable. He is in my seat, and he needs a move. End of discussion. The second attendant's jaw tightened, her professional mask slipping for a moment before she turned to the man. Sir, if you cannot produce your boarding pass for 1A, you must vacate this seat immediately. His face reddened, a vein pulsing at his temple as he fumbled in his pocket, finally producing his boarding stub with a dramatic flourish. He slapped it into her hand. There, happy. The attendant scanned the ticket quickly, her brows furrowing. Sir, your seat is actually 12C. In economy. The cabin erupted with gasps and muffled chuckles, the tension shifting into a different kind of energy, one that placed the man squarely in the spotlight of ridicule. Monica raised a single eyebrow, her lips curving into a calm, almost imperceptible smile. She had no need to gloat. The truth had already humiliated him far better than she ever could. But instead of conceding gracefully, the man doubled down, his voice rising. This is outrageous. I've flown with this airline for 20 years. You expect me to sit in the back with. He stopped himself, but the venom in his tone revealed what he had been about to say. Everyone knew it. The attendant stiffened, and Monica's calm mask cracked just slightly, enough for the sharp edge of her anger to shine through. She leaned forward, her voice low, but cutting enough for the entire cabin to hear. Sit down in your assigned seat, or you won't be flying anywhere today. For the first time, the man's smirk faltered. His defiance wavered under her unwavering stare, the kind that had dismantled hostile negotiators and silenced arrogant board members. Around them, phones quietly clicked as passengers began recording, sensing that this confrontation was about to become bigger than just a stolen seat. Monica didn't know it yet, but this incident was on the verge of spilling beyond the walls of the aircraft, soon to capture headlines and shake the airline industry itself. The atmosphere inside the cabin had shifted from mild irritation to electrified tension, the kind of pressure that builds when injustice is laid bare before a crowd. Passengers leaned forward in their seats, some openly recording on their phones, others whispering among themselves as though watching a live courtroom drama unfold at 30,000 feet. Except they hadn't even left the ground yet. Monica stood unwavering in the aisle, her gaze locked on the man who refused to budge, while the flight attendants traded frantic looks, clearly out of their depth. Finally, one of them whispered into the intercom at the galley, summoning the captain. The announcement alone caused a ripple across the cabin. This was no longer just about a seat. It was about authority, respect, and how the airline would respond when confronted with blatant misconduct. Within minutes, the cockpit door opened, and the captain stepped out, a tall man with silvering hair and the calm but firm presence of someone accustomed to authority. He took in the scene, The passenger in 1A sitting with a look of stubborn entitlement, Monica standing with calm but cutting dignity, and the flight attendants hovering nervously in between. What seems to be the problem here? His voice was even, but his eyes held the steel of command. Before anyone else could answer, the man leapt at the chance to seize control of the narrative. Captain, thank God you're here. This woman is trying to take my seat. I've flown with this airline for decades, and now I'm being disrespected in front of everyone. I demand you remove her. The captain turned his sharp gaze on Monica, who simply handed him her boarding pass with quiet confidence. 1A, purchased weeks ago, she said smoothly. He nodded, then extended his hand toward the man. May I see your boarding pass, sir? The man hesitated, his arrogance faltering as he realized his flimsy excuse was about to collapse. With a grunt, he shoved the crumpled stub into the captain's palm. The captain scanned it, his expression tightening. Sir, your seat is 12C economy class. A wave of murmurs and a few chuckles rolled through the cabin again, louder this time, emboldened by the captain's confirmation. But the man still refused to yield. Captain, with all due respect, I'm a platinum member. I don't sit in the back. This is outrageous. Monica folded her arms across her chest, her voice carrying through the cabin with calm authority. Your loyalty status doesn't entitle you to theft. This isn't a negotiation. That is my seat and you will move. The captain's tone grew firmer now. No room left for debate. Sir, you have two choices. Return to your assigned seat in economy or deplane. But I will not delay this flight further because of your refusal to follow airline policy. His words struck like a gavel, final and absolute. But instead of conceding, the man doubled down, his voice rising as his frustration boiled over. So, you're siding with her? Do you even know who I am? I contribute more to this airline than she ever will. She probably couldn't afford this seat without someone else paying for it. His words hung in the air like poison, dripping with the venom of entitlement and prejudice, and the cabin collectively recoiled. Monica felt her anger surge like a wave, but she kept her posture unshaken. Enough, she said, her voice slicing through his outburst. You've embarrassed yourself enough today. The only reason this conversation has gone on this long is because you thought no one would hold you accountable. But I assure you, accountability is coming. The captain's eyes narrowed, his patience exhausted. Sir, this is your last warning. Stand up and move to 12C now, or I will have airport security escort you off this plane. And if that happens, you won't be flying anywhere today. A silence fell, heavier than any before. The man looked around, realizing every phone camera was pointed at him, every eye watching, every passenger silently rooting for him to finally face the consequences of his arrogance. His face flushed crimson, beads of sweat dotting his forehead. Yet still he clung to his pride like a drowning man clings to driftwood. The cabin seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see whether the plane would take off, or whether the man's defiance would ground it before it even left the runway. The silence shattered when the man finally bellowed, Fine, call your so-called security, Captain. Let them drag me out. But this is discrimination. I'm not moving for her. He jabbed a finger toward Monica with venom, his voice cracking under the weight of his desperation. The captain, expression hardening, nodded at the flight attendant who had already been hovering near the intercom. Request airport security immediately, he instructed, and the words sent a wave of murmurs rippling through the cabin. Within minutes, two uniformed officers appeared at the boarding door, their presence sending a jolt of anticipation through the passengers who were eager to see justice served. They stepped into the cabin with professional calm, their eyes scanning the tense standoff before settling on the man in 1A. Sir, we've been informed you're refusing to comply with crew instructions, one officer said evenly. You need to either take your assigned seat or deplane immediately. The man leaned back stubbornly, gripping the armrests as though anchoring himself to the leather. This is unbelievable. You're siding with her, too. She's nobody, just some pushy woman trying to act like she belongs here. I won't be humiliated in front of everyone. Monica took a step forward then, her voice calm but carrying an unmistakable authority that silenced the whispers around her. "Nobody here is humiliating you, sir. You've done that all on your own. You're sitting in my seat in violation of both airline policy and federal regulations, and now you're obstructing a flight that should have left already. This isn't a matter of loyalty points or status. It's a matter of law." The officer arched an eyebrow, surprised at the precision of her words, and asked cautiously, "Ma'am, may I have your name for the record?" Monica's lips curved into a faint but knowing smile. She leaned in just enough for her words to carry clearly to every corner of the cabin. "Monica Caldwell, CEO of Caldwell Aeronautics. My company provides a significant portion of this airline's aviation technology and safety systems. So yes, I do belong here." The revelation detonated in the cabin like a thunderclap. Gasps, murmurs, and even audible "oh my goddess" filled the air. The man's eyes widened, his bravado cracking into panic as the weight of what he'd just done settled on him. He hadn't just stolen any seat. He'd openly humiliated a woman whose influence stretched far beyond the cabin of this aircraft. The officers exchanged sharp looks. Now, recognizing the gravity of the situation, the captain straightened, his respect for Monica evident as he said, "Ms. Caldwell, thank you for your patience. We'll resolve this immediately." He turned to the man in 1A, his voice sharp as steel. "Sir, you're officially being removed from this flight for noncompliance and disorderly conduct. You've delayed this aircraft, disrespected a passenger, and endangered our schedule. Officers, please escort him off." The man's protests grew shrill as the officers moved closer, their hands firm on his shoulders. "This isn't fair. She's just pulling strings because of who she is." But his words fell flat against the collective silence of the cabin, every passenger now glaring at him as if he were poison. The officers hauled him from the seat as he kicked and shouted, his arrogance dissolved into pathetic whining. Phones recorded every second, documenting his downfall for the world beyond the airplane. Monica finally stepped forward and lowered herself into her rightful seat with regal calm, her movements deliberate, dignified, and unshaken. The passengers erupted into applause, some cheering, others simply sighing with relief. Yet beneath the celebration, a deeper current flowed. Every person on that plane now understood they hadn't just witnessed a petty argument over a seat. They had witnessed power, dignity, and justice colliding midair, and the echoes of it would stretch far beyond the runway. Monica adjusted her seatbelt, her face composed, but her eyes carried a fire that told the world this wasn't over. The plane finally taxied away from the gate after the disruptive passenger had been escorted off, but the cabin still buzzed with energy, passengers whispering about the drama they had just witnessed, their phones glowing as clips of the confrontation spread to social media in real time. Monica, sitting in her rightful seat, remained poised, her expression unreadable as though she'd anticipated every moment that had unfolded. Yet inside, her mind churned with thoughts, not of anger or vindication, but of how easily entitlement had escalated into disruption, how one man's arrogance had cost hundreds of people their time and peace. A flight attendant approached her quietly, kneeling beside her seat, with an expression of gratitude mixed with concern. "Miss Caldwell, we deeply apologize for what happened," she whispered. "The airline will issue a formal apology once we land. We never intended for you to experience such disrespect." Monica offered a measured nod. "It's not just about me," she replied softly but firmly. "It's about the message this sends to everyone who thinks power or privilege gives them the right to trample others. This could have been any woman, any person of color, any passenger who was dismissed because someone else decided they mattered more." The attendant's throat tightened, and she nodded before retreating. Meanwhile, across the rows, passengers were already uploading their videos with captions like, "Man refuses to give up stolen first-class seat, faces CEO instead. And this woman handled him with class. Wait until you hear who she is." Monica's phone buzzed with notifications, her staff already reaching out as hashtags with her name trended globally. By the time the plane reached cruising altitude, What had started as a heated argument over a seat had evolved into a cultural flashpoint. News outlets picked it up within minutes, anchors replaying the clips with shocked commentary. A first-class passenger refused to move, not knowing the woman he insulted is a top black CEO. One broadcast announced, the video playing behind them. The man's face was plastered across feeds, his arrogance immortalized for millions to witness, and the court of public opinion was merciless. Monica leaned back in her seat, finally allowing herself a long exhale, her hands resting lightly on the armrests. She hadn't sought attention, but she knew what this meant. A conversation had been sparked about entitlement, respect, and the invisible battles people like her fought daily despite their status or success. A man had stolen her seat, yes, but what he truly revealed was how deeply society still underestimated women who looked like her. She sipped her water calmly, her gaze steady out the window at the endless horizon, already preparing herself for the storm waiting on the ground. Because this incident, she knew, was no longer just about a seat on a plane, it was about dignity, justice, and the reckoning of arrogance, and Monica Caldwell was ready to face it head-on. The plane finally taxied away from the gate after the disruptive passenger had been escorted off, but the cabin still buzzed with energy, passengers whispering about the drama they had just witnessed, their phones glowing as clips of the confrontation spread to social media in real time. Monica, sitting in her rightful seat, remained poised, her expression unreadable, as though she'd anticipated every moment that had unfolded. Yet inside, her mind churned with thoughts, not of anger or vindication, but of how easily entitlement had escalated into disruption, how one man's arrogance had cost hundreds of people their time and peace. A flight attendant approached her quietly, kneeling beside her seat, with an expression of gratitude mixed with concern. "Miss Caldwell, we deeply apologize for what happened," she whispered. "The airline will issue a formal apology once we land. We never intended for you to experience such disrespect." Monica offered a measured nod. "It's not just about me," she replied softly but firmly. "It's about the message this sends to everyone who thinks power or privilege gives them the right to trample others. This could have been any woman, any person of color, any passenger who was dismissed because someone else decided they mattered more." The attendant's throat tightened, and she nodded before retreating. Meanwhile, across the rows, passengers were already uploading their videos with captions like, "Man refuses to give up stolen first-class seat, faces CEO instead. And this woman handled him with class? Wait until you hear who she is." Monica's phone buzzed with notifications, her staff already reaching out as hashtags with her name trended globally. By the time the plane reached cruising altitude, what had started as a heated argument over a seat had evolved into a cultural flashpoint. News outlets picked it up within minutes, anchors replaying the clips with shocked commentary. A first-class passenger refused to move, not knowing the woman he insulted is a top black CEO. One broadcast announced, the video playing behind them. The man's face was plastered across feeds, his arrogance immortalized for millions to witness, and the court of public opinion was merciless. Monica leaned back in her seat, finally allowing herself a long exhale, her hands resting lightly on the armrests. She hadn't sought attention, but she knew what this meant. A conversation had been sparked about entitlement, respect, and the invisible battles people like her fought daily despite their status or success. A man had stolen her seat, yes, but what he truly revealed was how deeply society still underestimated women who looked like her. She sipped her water calmly, her gaze steady out the window at the endless horizon, already preparing herself for the storm waiting on the ground. Because this incident, she knew, was no longer just about a seat on a plane, it was about dignity, justice, and the reckoning of arrogance, and Monica Caldwell was ready to face it head-on. The following week became a whirlwind of headlines, interviews, and consequences, but Monica stood at the center of it like a mountain refusing to bend beneath the storm. The passenger who had stolen her seat was unmasked across every news outlet, his smug defiance replayed millions of times, his reputation shredded within days. The airline, desperate to salvage its image, scrambled to meet Monica privately, offering settlements, free flights, and donations to diversity programs, but she dismissed their attempts with icy precision. "You don't get to buy silence," she told them during a tense boardroom meeting, her voice calm but unwavering. "You earn redemption through change." The executives sat rigid as she laid out a plan far beyond their expectations: mandatory cultural sensitivity training across all staff, transparent reporting of customer discrimination complaints, and an independent review board to monitor compliance. Or, she added with deliberate pause, "I take this to court and make you the symbol of everything wrong in corporate culture today." The silence in the room was suffocating, broken only when one executive muttered that it would cost millions. Monica leaned forward, her gaze sharp as steel. "And how much has arrogance cost you already? Look at your stocks. Look at your headlines. Look at the trust you've lost." The words cut through like a blade, and they knew she was right. Within days, the airline agreed to her terms publicly, announcing sweeping reforms under pressure from both Monica and the watching world. She didn't stop there, though. Monica used her platform to amplify voices from everyday passengers who had suffered silently for years. Talk shows, op-eds, and even congressional hearings invited her to speak, her story fueling a broader reckoning in the airline industry. What had started as one man's attempt to steal her seat had become a catalyst for systemic change. And yet, through it all, Monica never lost her composure. She never once raised her voice, because true power, she knew, didn't need to shout, it simply refused to bend. Months later, when she boarded another first-class flight, the crew greeted her not just with respect, but with a sense of reverence, as if they were welcoming a symbol larger than herself. She took her seat calmly, the way she always did, her gaze fixed on the horizon. The world had shifted because she had refused to, and as the engines roared to life, passengers whispered her name, not as the woman who had her seat stolen, but as the leader who proved that dignity could never be grounded